What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another Dragonflight video. How are you all doing? I hope you're doing very well. Listen, we're going to talk today about an interview that Liquid Max did with Ion Hazzikostas, the game director for World of Warcraft, and obviously leading on the Dragonflight stuff. This is mostly about Dragonflight. Some of it is about Season 4 in Shadowlands and how that's going to affect the rest of the game, which is really, really cool. There's lots of really good topics in this interview. This is a great, great interview from Max and also from Ion. One thing I got to say is that it just feels like Ion just feels like he's had a breath of fresh air ever since, I don't know, 9.2.5 when, like, something happened in, like, the leadership of this company. And not on Ian's end, but like above Ian, and it feels like he just has so much more breathing room now, and he's just able to communicate things with the community more, and it just feels so much better. So I honestly think the game is going to be in such a great state as we get to the end of Shadowlands and move into Dragonflight, and these kinds of interviews only solidify that for me. So I have my notes here. I'm going to jump through, and I'm going to be pausing at different points in the video to give my thoughts. If you want to see the full interview, it is linked down below. Okay, without further ado, the very first thing that they talk about is thoughts on Season 4.
I think, first of all, the community loves it. At best, I think it's a great new idea that can, revolutionize the end of expansion's gameplay. Very worst, honestly, is just objectively better than a super long Season 3. So basically, what are some of your thoughts about Season 4? And if you've had any time during Dragonflight to think about maybe if it could be brought back or improved upon?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for those thoughts and those reactions. I think it's been overall super happy with how it's played out. Definitely,
Season
some
4 has
bumps
been
the
good.
first week, especially with scaling issues. We never really used that tech at this scale before, so we had to work out some of the kinks in the system there. But I think we went into this hoping that it would play out largely the way it had, and if it did, that this could become something that we go to in the future at the very end of an expansion. Just kind of in those last few months, everyone knows the next expansion's on the horizon. You finish the story, you finish the current expansion's content. It's just kind of a remix and a chance to revisit kind of the greatest hits of the expansion as a whole. Tuning has been definitely something we've been looking at. Like I think now that people have more gear, pretty happy with where that's landed. And we definitely heard a lot of feedback, especially the first couple of weeks from like Hall of Fame and cutting edge, but not guilds like your guild. That it felt too much like reprogression, and it's like then we go look at logs and realize like, look, you guys wiped like 5 times, then killed the boss. Like that's not really progression, but I get it, right? Like,
yeah. So there's a bunch of really good points here. So number one, Season 4 is awesome. It gives Blizzard a chance to give a sort of a recap on the whole expansion and to go back and look at, like we're doing right now. We're doing Castle Nathria and Sanctum and Sepulchre, and some of those bosses people don't like to go and do again. Like some people just don't like those bosses. But you only have to do it for 1 week, and then the next week it's a totally different raid. So same with the Mythic Plus schedule, which they are carrying through into Dragonflight as well. You get to have a fresh start, an entirely new season with new dungeons. You get to go learn them again. That is an amazing experience and a really good feeling, and I'm glad they're carrying that into Dragonflight. But the other thing is like the tuning of it. It's something that is difficult, right? The first time you've ever seen a raid, there's a difficulty there. There's a difficulty that automatically comes with having never done the raid before. So they tend to tune, I think, raids to that degree, where it's like, if you've never stepped foot in Castle Nathria before, that first playthrough is going to be harder than it is right now if you're doing it as a fated raid, because you've seen it. You've done each fight, hundreds of times. And so they have to kind of tune for that. I think they've done a really good job in this season, and I think Ian is very happy with it, and the team is very happy with it, which is great. And I think it means that we are going to see it in the future, which is great. I think that's exactly how it should go. I think that the expansion should come out, and we should do all the new content as it rolls out, and then as we get into like the maintenance mode of each expansion, we go back and we revisit all of those things, and we get to redo them again in a fresh way. And I think that that's an exciting way to approach it. So I like where they're going with that. Max asks him if there's going to be loot targeting like a vendor, as there is now in future expansions.
And raids, where a lot of the like loot acquisition systems. So you had to create a few new unique ones because of the way the raids would be rotating. But I kind of wanted to ask you about them. So like Dinar and the upgrade essences from Heroic and Mythic, like I said, I think they're excellent. Is there a chance that we could actually see a truncated version of this in a regular season that would maybe help with loot targeting? So an idea for that is like currently someone could do an entire Mythic Sanctum raid every week and never see a Jathis, maybe. It obviously would have to be much less, but like, what could that look like?
I think something like this for sure.
So that's
kind of like
exciting.
the season, the season structure itself, we see this as a time for experimentation, and experiments aren't necessarily going to be carried forward in their exact form, but the idea of like anti-RNG backstops and some feeling of security and guarantee that you will eventually get that chase best in slot item you want feels like a useful thing for us to explore. I mean, the Dinar system, I think, in terms of how upfront it is and how quickly you're getting some things, that is probably way more accelerated than we would ever do in a regular news season.
Yeah, so he's basically saying, like, yes, we want to continue this kind of system into Dragonflight. No, it's not going to be as fast as it is right now in Season 4, because obviously we have an accelerated, very, very, very quick season. So this is good news, because I think it means that they want to protect against the RNG nature of this game, where you could go and do an entire Sanctum Domination run and never get the daggers from Sylvanas. They do want protection against that for players. I think that's a good direction for the game, and Ian just says that that's where they're going to go with it, which is very, very good. What that's going to look like in Dragonflight, we're not really sure, but he has said there that they want to continue doing this kind of system. I think everything that they're learning from Season 4 in Shadowlands, it sounds like they're going to take all of it into Dragonflight. So like the Mythic Plus, seasonal swapping of all the dungeons is going to keep happening. Later in the expansion, getting sort of a faded raid system coming in is going to happen, and getting a loot vendor for raid is also going to happen at some point, which is awesome. It's just awesome to see. Okay, we're going to skip ahead. They talk about raid size / difficulty / kind of a lockout, and we're going to talk about all those problems. It has to do with like pug rating and mythic difficulty and all this kind of stuff. We'll talk about it right here.
It'd be potentially much better for a lot of other people in the game.
So it could be. So I think when you talk about pugs, for sure, the rigid lockout system for Mythic is inconvenient for pugs. But I think at its core, Mythic raid difficulty isn't really meant for pugs. People will pug.
So this is a really good point. And I really agree with Ian on this, that basically he's saying like, should like Mythic raid be more accessible like for pugs? And the answer is kind of no, because the Mythic difficulty is designed to be so difficult that you need to have crisp communication, you need to have a bond and like a trust with your group. You need to know that everybody in your group's going to perform fairly well. Having a random person come into the group to try and tackle a Mythic raid, if you're not really sure if they know the fight, it's not impossible. It's not that it can't happen. It's just that it doesn't usually happen as well as if you have a solid group of 20 people that are tackling the Mythic raids all together.
Pug it later on in the season for sure, especially on bigger servers. Certainly, in Season 4 like this, where the fights are much better known, the tuning's more forgiving, sure. But it's one of those things where like, the lockout is an example of a little bit of healthy friction. We talk about, friction that can have social benefits, like, stuff that was removed when we added Raid Finder, Dungeon Finder back in the day. This is one of those examples in that joining a Mythic raid is a little bit of a commitment.
Yeah.
I could argue that there's an upside for pugs as well, which is that, if you're doing a Mythic Nathria pug, kill Shriekwing, and then suddenly, things aren't going great on Altamore, it's a great reason not to bail on that group. It's a great reason to not have a quarter of the group say, "Now these guys don't get it. I'm out. I'm going to find another group," because you're locked for the week. You're together with them.
You have to figure it out.
So this is a tough point. I don't totally agree with them here, because like what actually happens in game is that a pug, sometimes people will try and pug with your group on like Shriekwing, like say it's Mythic Shriekwing, and they can tell that you don't understand the mechanic right away. Whoever's holding the lantern, if you've done Mythic Shriekwing, the person holding the lantern trying to walk around with it, they don't know what they're doing. And so like after 2 or 3 pulls, they're like, I'm out. I'm just going to leave. And like they don't care that they're now locked to your lockout. They just don't want to deal with the fact that you guys don't understand what you're doing. I have been with a couple of different pug groups over the years where like a handful, I could probably count them on one hand, where we got to a boss that was difficult, we struggled through it, and then we persevered, and we got the kill. and we all felt amazing afterwards. It actually happened on Anduin. It happened on Anduin for me, heroic Anduin, like last year. But that is pretty rare. Most of the time, people come in, and if they see that you can't do a boss fight as a pug, they're just going to leave, and they don't really care that they got the lockout. They'll just wait till next week. I've had that happen a lot of times. So I'm not entirely in agreement with Ian on this one. I like the idea of what they're trying to say there, which is like, we are putting a lockout here to kind of force you to try and stick around with the group. I don't know that that is always what happens. That's not always the result.
Yeah, and like that, I think that actually it encourages somewhat stronger social bonds, reliance on others.
It does,
At the same time,
but that doesn't matter to some people.
One boss.
Sometimes that
But I
doesn't
think
matter.
The downsides to the overall Mythic ecosystem, if we just removed that lockout and made them flex, would outweigh the upsides. And there's a reason why, like, normal and heroic are designed to be much more inherently flexible.
This part I
structure,
agree with.
Pug friendly. That's why those work that way. That's why Mythic still works the old way.
That I do agree with. I like that he's basically saying, like, we have designed normal and heroic to be possible to do in a pug environment where you're not being 100% optimal. That's what those are designed for. Mythic is designed where you need to optimize much more, both in terms of like how good your players are, how well that you know how good they can play, the trust there, and also the composition of the raid and stuff. So
Okay,
that was
cool.
really
So
important
no plans
there.
to change that. And yeah, the split thing,
No.
the split.
They talk about the heroic splits and stuff, but we're gonna move on here. Let's go to 8.10. They're gonna talk a little bit about crossover, like cross realm stuff here. So cross server guilds? Question mark.
Is there any possibility we could get cross realm at the beginning or earlier in the season in Dragonflight now that the Hall of Fame is less relevant?
Yeah, I think it's like I don't think we're likely to do it right from the very beginning, though we're moving in that direction. We did it for Sepulchre before the Hall of Fame was full. I think it's likely we're going to repeat that
This
again
is good.
for Vault going forward. In general, the game as a whole, I think, is moving at tearing down server boundaries. We want to make more and more things cross server. I think we recognize, like, 15 years ago, back in Classic, if you log into Classic today, you have the strength of sort of insular, self-contained communities where you're seeing the same people over and over again, and there's a lot of upsides that offset the downsides of some of these restrictions. I think in the modern game, really, server increasingly feels like restrictions without as much upside. And so we are systematically working at chipping away at all of those divisions. It just takes time. So I think when we get to
This
a
is good.
point where things like potentially cross-server guilds down the line and so
There,
forth
he said
are
it.
on the table, I think fully cross-server raids from the start will be automatic. But for now, we want to
Yeah, so that's good. So he's basically saying, like, we're gonna get to a stage where cross realm, raiding is gonna be possible, and cross realm guilds will be possible. And I think we've kind of known that this is coming, but it's a great direction for the game to go. The game does need to get more social, not less. And there was, this idea in Classic where it's like you had to seek out and find people on your server, and you could be like the only blacksmith on your server that did this, and you could be like the best PvP person on your server, and like nobody cares about that anymore. Nobody cares. There's too many people playing the game now, and it's really blown wide open. People just want accessibility, and I think that we're going to be getting that. And as we've seen over the last several months and years, they've been merging servers together. And like they just did with the auction house changes, they made most of the commodities on the auction house global. So you can trade much more efficiently, much better. There's more people to buy your goods now, which is really good. That's exactly the direction the game should be going. So yeah, I'm happy to see this. Let's go to 1240. We're going to talk about raid buff philosophy. Okay? So this is interesting. We're talking about things like classes that bring raid buffs, which ones, because we're getting more of that in Dragonflight. What is that going to look like?
Need to be fully optimal, but yeah. Basically, can you explain your philosophy around raid buffs and how it's differed from X-Back to X-Back, where some classes were not required and now might be?
Yeah, so, okay. Let's see. Let me make sure I have
That was a
all
long
of that
question.
right.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, okay. So, like, I guess, so some of it is stuff you mentioned that I've talked about in the past, but I think the origins of bring the player, not the class, were like the extreme other end of the spectrum back in late Burning Crusade, where it wasn't just raid buffs, it was a matrix of party buffs. And it was, as people saw in BC raiding, well, you need a rogue in the group with a warrior to give battle shout, the warrior needs Wind Fury or they're bad, and sometimes you'd have somebody who's a good player, plays a class that's theoretically good, but you don't have room for them in your specific raid party matrix, and so they can't contribute. That
Yeah.
felt clearly not what we wanted.
BC was
And
that was pretty
we
rough
moved away from that steadily. But I think where we're moving
for
back
that
towards
reason.
is class mattering, making sure that the best raid composition, if you want to be optimal, is one that has representation of all 12, soon to be all 13 classes.
This is good. I think this is the way the game should go as well. You should always have a reason to bring a specific class. Some people disagree with me on this, and I want to hear what you guys think in the comments actually about this specific point. Do you think that it's good that the game is trying to force us to bring like one of every class into like a big 20-man raid or something like that? Or, you know, even a 15-man raid. You can have 13 out of the 15 classes and then have 2 more of whatever you want. I like the idea that there isn't just one set of there isn't just like one class that's going to be better than the other ones, and that the buffs that are provided by all the different classes are meaningful enough that you want to bring them. I think that that's a great direction for the game to go.
And that's, 20-player Mythic raid format supports that. I think that's something that is friendly for pugs as well in a flex raid setting. Like if you're a pug leader, you're trying to recruit the optimal group, get a group together. If you don't have a warlock, you should be looking for a warlock. If you don't have a hunter, you should be looking for a hunter, as opposed to which is the meta range spec, this tier.
Yeah.
Let me just bring 5 of them and we're good to go. That helps provide social opportunities for the full range of players.
Yeah, this is good.
Now, that said, we want to make sure that none of these buffs feels too impactful.
Yeah, this is
to the
good
point
too.
That it's like you can't go without it. It's utterly mandatory at multiple levels of play, not just the top tier level. In that case, we want to look at things like tuning. We want to look at things like alternate buff items that can provide a substitute, or just increasing availability. I think the 2 most classic ones in this space are, Bloodlust, Battle Res. I think no group at almost any level is going to go without them.
This is cool.
The
Listen,
percentage of classes that brings those buffs has decreased naturally over the years. That's something we're looking at changing. So a little scoop for you. I think you'll probably see this in the next beta build, or next alpha build rather. Evokers will bring Bloodlust, so we'll have a 4th Lust class in the mix. We're also looking at adding Battle Res to 1 more class. Possibly Paladins, likely Paladins, but don't 100% quote me on that.
Okay.
that's funny. I was talking to the guys about this the other day. I think you guys have seen this on Wowhead, but of course, it looks like Paladin's going to get Battle Res, and Evoker is definitely getting Bloodlust. So I don't think Evoker actually needs Bloodlust. Like, they have a lot of other buttons, but whatever. I think it's good to have all this flavor. This is what you need, I think. To me, this is always like the Starcraft argument. If you guys have ever played Starcraft, what I'm saying is the early units that you buy in Starcraft are a Marine for Terran, Protoss gets a Zealot, and Zerg gets Zerglings, okay? If you spend 100 minerals, you get 2 Marines, you get 1 Zealot, and you get 4 Zerglings. That's a very different, composition. Those all look different, right? 4 Zerglings, 2 Marines, 1 Zealot. The Marines are ranged. The Zerglings are fast. The Zealot's really, really strong and tough. They're all actually fairly equal. If you pit them up against each other, they will each can win against each other, even though they look drastically different. And what I'm trying to say is that's a really good way that Blizzard balanced StarCraft, was they had an amazing team of people who figured out how to make these 3 different, very, very, very different looking units actually have an equal combat power. They're trying to do that in WoW, where they say we have Death Knights and Druids, and we've got Priests, and we have Monks, and we have all these different types of... They have 13 classes, for crying out loud, to try and balance around. I think they're trying their absolute hardest to say, we want you to be able to bring one of everything for a reason, but we don't want the buffs that they bring to be so powerful that they're mandatory. So that's why we saw the Warrior Battle Shout get nerfed a little bit. The Priest... stamina get nerfed a little bit. Those kinds of things where these buffs are maybe a little bit too strong. If you want them, they're very powerful to have, but they're not so powerful that they are absolutely mandatory and you're an idiot for not bringing them. So I think it's really important just to understand that they're trying to have some creativity in the mix here as well, that they want these buffs to exist, but they want it to be creative. I think it's actually fine as well that they're adding more in. So a Battle Res for one of the healers, could be Paladin, could be Monk. Some people talk about wanting Monk to have a buff like that, and I think that might be fairly true, although Monk already gets the Mystic Touch debuff, so, I mean, that's just an insanely strong buff in and of itself. 5% more physical damage for all your melee people is quite strong. So we'll have to just see where they go with it, but They continue talking about these raid buffs. Let me just skip ahead though to 17. So we're talking here about the difference between like difficulties, like normal and heroic versus raid, and whether or not you like need these buffs.
Needed is the thing that shouldn't be something that we're building in encounters, certainly on non-mythic difficulties. Like, if having knockbacks, having death grip, having a certain tool makes your life a bit easier in normal and heroic, great. And again, like pug leaders, especially, like pug leaders are encouraged to, it's flex raid for a reason. Look for a death knight. There's a ton out there who are actively looking for groups. Get one in, it'll help you. Philosophically, like we talk about normal versus heroic, I think part of the difference there, like a normal group, normal mode is pugs, but also just really casual friends and family groups that are just there to play with each other. They're not looking to bring strangers into their group.
You're just there to have fun.
To, like, recruit to get a certain class or re-roll. We want to make sure that at that difficulty, you can succeed regardless.
Yeah, so he's saying like people who just want to have fun with the game and like play normal and heroic, get AOTC every tier and just kind of like chill. They're not looking to play the game 100% optimally. They're going to play whichever class and spec they want to play because they're having fun playing that, and they should be allowed, they should be able to do that. They should be able to do the content, normal and heroic content, playing whatever spec and whatever class they want to, and that is how they're aiming to make the game.
You can succeed with a
Mythic
very
is different.
Comp as long as you have the basics covered. At heroic level, like to some extent, the difference there, even if you're not like cutting edge Mythic, you still, there's some challenge, there's some coordination, you care about success. You're not going to bring along a person who's doing 50% less damage than everybody else if you're failing to meet a DPS check. And so in that space, bringing in classes that can help you is useful. If it's ever literally impossible, then we're going to probably make mechanical changes to the encounter. We're going to give you more time. We're going to, make a cast interruptible. We'll do something there. So it's like, it's not just ridiculously punishing if you don't have that specific class. Honestly though, like, things like Death Grip, we would like more of those.
So it's good. I mean, I think he's just saying like all the different tools are good there. If you think about like Soul Render Dormazane in Sanctum, so that's the one with Garrosh at the front, he's like yelling and screaming. That fight has ads. If you don't have a Death Knight on that fight, it can make the fight much more difficult for sure. However, there are other ways to tackle the problem of the ads are trying to make their way to the front of the room. You can use monks with, Ring of Peace. You can slow the enemies down with lots of other classes, like a hamstring from a warrior, or you can stun them with a cap totem from a shaman. There are lots of other tools. The most optimal one you could use is a death grip, but the fight is doable on heroic without death knights, and I think that is important. That is important moving forward into Dragonflight, that all the fights that we're doing are possible to do without having 100% optimal comp, because lots of people don't want to. Lots of people are not looking to play this game to be race to world first, to play optimally. They're just looking to play whatever fantasy of the class that they want to play. I want to be a monk. I am a druid. I don't care if resto druids are not meta right now. I want to play a resto druid. I should be able to do that in normal and heroic. And I'm just glad that Ian is going to continue. They're just looking to continue that into Dragonflight. That's exactly the way the game should go. Okay. Let's go. 2130, just to cap this all off. He did sort of mention, Ian alluded to the fact that there might be scrolls returning in Dragonflight, but let's see what he says here.
Something about, if you need to, you would potentially add them back, but just maybe not buffing Lust Drums back to what they are, because you just added another class that brings it, right?
But I mean, I think we're open to it. I think part of the challenge there.
This is about scrolls.
When you think about where the scrolls are used, they're not just a raid consumable. They become, a mandatory consumable for every dungeon situation.
Yeah.
Where by definition, you're not going to have class representation because you can't.
Yeah.
And then it also starts to turn into like, well, wait, so the thing that I bring as a warrior, as a druid, whatever, is like a 2% better version of this buff where people don't have to spend gold on a consumable. Like, that just makes their contribution feel less cool. So ideally, we would want to find a middle ground, whether maybe that's reducing the baseline power or otherwise tuning, so that it just still feels like, cool, we have this class, this is a benefit that we have, and the difference between having it and not isn't something that you can't overcome otherwise.
Yeah, so I think he's basically saying like they want to make it so that the classes that bring these buffs that you could get from a scroll, the classes that bring it, they want it to be like that. You should just bring the class because it's better to have the warrior giving you the whatever the buff is versus whatever the scroll gives you. Otherwise, it takes away from the fantasy of that class, bringing you that buff. So I think that's a good direction. Again, I think I'm repeating myself here. I said that before, but that's where the game should be going, which is very, very good. I think they also talk a little bit about consumables in Shadowlands, that they went a little bit too far with consumables. And like if you had like, you'd have to have like potions and flasks and armor kits and oils and sharpening stones. Like there's just way too many things to have to sort of bring every single week, and it's a big economic cost as well. So they're going to reduce that in Dragonflight, which is very, very good. We kind of talked about this, the fresh start M+ season. We're going to skip ahead to well, we'll go to 24. Let me see here. Let's go to here. Well, we'll talk about it. It's actually important. I'm going to talk about it for a second.
Sure.
So the Mythic Plus system in Dragonflight, kind of getting a sneak peek of it in Season 4. So I think it'll actually, probably be a lot better now that you've had a run at retuning some old raids, which has been really nice. The only thing that I could kind of think of as a potential downside is that what happens if, in Season 1, you run into one of your new Dragonflight dungeons that is just extremely good. It is like the key that people want to run, not because it's easy to time. It's just like this key is so very fun. You can think of a lot of people have different opinions of these, but like what that would be. It may sadden Mythic Plus players that they have an amazing dungeon and they don't get to play it for a long time. So basically what I'm asking is, what's the balance of good versus...
What he means there is, like, in Season 1 of Dragonflight, you'll get to play 4 Dragonflight dungeons and 4 past dungeons. Once you get to Season 2, you're losing those first 4 Dragonflight dungeons that you had, and you're getting 4 new Dragonflight dungeons. So if you really like some of those dungeons, you won't get to play them.
And if anything...
In Season 2.
And you might not be able to speak on this because it's kind of in the future, but, like, do you have any plans for Season 3 or 4 of Mythic Plus? As at that point, you've kind of shown what you'll do in Season 1 and 2, right? You'll
this is really important.
Returning. Maybe to bring back some old favorites.
Yes, I think we definitely have room to revisit, maybe tweak or update, or just revisit as they were if everyone loves them, a dungeon later on in the season. I think Season 2 is almost certainly going to be the other 4 Dragonflight dungeons plus 4 other legacy ones. But beyond that, I think, one thing...
So yeah, sorry, really quick. He's saying, like, Season 1 and 2 are basically locked in for Dragonflight. You're going to have the first 4 Dragonflight dungeons and 4 past dungeons. Season 2 will have the other 4 Dragonflight dungeons and 4 other past dungeons. Season 3 of Dragonflight is where it could start to get interesting.
Does is also gives more room for us to potentially add all new dungeons over the course of an expansion.
This is cool.
Something we would like to get back to doing more of. I think back in Legion, when we last did this, one of the quick challenges that we ran into was integrating a brand new dungeon into a pool of dungeons that the community had already mastered. Mm-hmm. Like when Cathedral Mythic Plus rolled out.
Oh, this is such a good point.
That was a super dead key for a long time, even more so with Secret of Triumvirate.
Yeah.
Yep. And like, it wasn't actually like the challenges. It wasn't they were, in some cases they were actually harder, but like beyond that, it wasn't that they were that much harder. It's that you were comparing a dungeon the community had 1 week of knowledge of to a dungeon they had been running, for over a year.
Yeah, so this is really cool. He's basically saying, like, in Legion, they added these 2 dungeons partway through, like, the entire expansion. And then people, like, were like, these dungeons are so hard. But they weren't. It's just that you hadn't spent 300 hours, going through those dungeons like you had in all the other dungeons in Legion. So they don't want to repeat that mistake. So instead, what they're going to do is you're going to do what they're doing in Season 4, which is to say you have 8 dungeons that you're running. By the end of this season, you're done with all 8 of those, and you're going to get 8 new dungeons. Not 2 new dungeons, so that you have 6 dungeons that you know very well and 2 dungeons that you don't know very well, and you're going to think, oh my god, these dungeons are so much harder. Instead, you're going to get 8 brand new dungeons, and you're going to have to learn how to do all of them at the same time. So it's not going to feel like 2 of them are hard to learn and 6 of them you've already mastered. That makes sense. So we're getting a snippet of that in Season 4 right now. People have been like complaining about Lower Karazhan and the Iron Docks and Grimrail Depot being like, these are too hard. But like at this point already, a group of the people in my guild, they're already doing like 20s. We're doing 20s in like Grimrail Depot and the Iron Docks, not in Lower Karazhan yet. We'll get there. But the point is, you will learn how to do these dungeons and you will get better at them. And that's a good thing. And it means like What it means is the future of Mythic Plus is actually going to be so bright, guys. I can't stress this enough. This new system, they're creating a whole new system for this, where instead of you just doing the same dungeons for 2 years straight, you're going to be doing the same dungeons for 6 months. And then you're going to get a new season and do all new dungeons for 6 months. And it's going to be like getting a brand new raid. You get a brand new set of dungeons, and you get to run them all, and you get to relearn them all, or learn, in this case, it's going to be new Dragonflight dungeons. And then what Ian is also saying on top of all this is that they now will have an opportunity to add in new dungeons like they did with Seat of the Triumvirate and Cathedral of Light in Legion. They can add these dungeons in as brand new dungeons, and it won't feel like, oh my god, this is so hard compared to the dungeons I already know, because you're going to have a whole slate of dungeons that you don't know, and you're going to have to learn them again. And I just think that idea is great. Having a reset on Mythic Plus, getting to learn new dungeons, getting a new set of loot that I can go chase, I think that's actually really fun. And I love that. Some people I think don't like that idea, and I get that, but new stuff I think is always better. A fresh start every new season is really, really fun to pursue. So I'm really happy that they're going in this direction. They talk a little bit about Dragonriding in here, which is really cool. In terms of is it going to become an evergreen system that's going to go into the regular world? And basically Ian says yes, they want to take Dragonriding into the rest of Azeroth, but they're not sure exactly how they're going to tackle that right now, and they don't want to invalidate all the mounts that people have collected over the years. So they want to be careful about that. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about the Dragonflight class trees at the end here. So let's go to 3155. They talk about standardized level of feedback here. Feedback for the talent trees in Dragonflight.
Excellent changes, speaking about DK specifically. And then some other classes have had less updates. Basically, just asking, can there be a more standardized level of feedback between all the classes, and how has that been going for you guys?
Yeah, druids and priests, we hear you. We're gonna have information soon. Apologies for the silence. I know you deserve better, and you rightly expect better. Ideally, yes, we would have had just more even-handed communication across the board.
This is good to hear from Ian.
It's I know billion-dollar company and all, but at the end of the day, it's also a number of humans who can all just fit in one room together, who are handling both the class design side of it and the community communication side of it. And life happens that results in, gaps along the way. Sometimes one developer is working on a couple of classes and has one done, but they need to get the other one done because understandably players of that class are impatient, but that
So this is really insightful. We have never heard Ian or anybody talk about how the development team actually functions. He basically confirms here that the development team is probably not that big, that it's enough people that you can fit them into one room, as he said there. I'm guessing that this team is probably no more than 10 people, and you've got them working on all of the talent trees in Dragonflight. And you might say to yourself, well, that Blizzard should put more resources onto this. That's a bad decision on their end, but whatever. At this point, it is what it is. So I think we should just make sure that we're being patient with these developers, and I think it's really important to not be yelling and screaming at them on Wowhead and Reddit and whatever, because these are just maybe 10 or 12 people in a room, and like he just said, some of them have multiple classes that they're responsible for. So this makes so much sense now with how these trees have been rolled out, because the Druid and the Priest trees came out very, very early and have had literally no iteration since then, very, very little iteration since then. So clearly, the people who were developing the Priest and the Druid trees moved on to other classes, and they will come back to Priest and Druid now that all of the classes have been done, and there's an ability for them to start iterating now. But that's why we have had no communication on it. So Ian basically apologizes for the fact that there's been no communication, but you guys have to remember, these people, they don't have a communications team. Really what there should be is probably a development team and a communication team. And the development team just gets to sit there and work on it, and the communication team gets to watch them, and then the communication team can, every Friday, they can send out a big news post that says, hey, guys, here's what we worked on this week. These, Druid and Priest, you guys are not getting any updates for a few weeks. We're very sorry about that, but this is why, yada, yada, yada. But you can see here that these guys have to both develop the trees and then also try to put out announcements for the community on where the trees are at. And I just think it's very clear that there's not enough manpower to get that done. Now, I'm not saying there's not enough manpower for them to create good talent trees. I think there will be. And Ian talks a little bit about that right here in terms of, you can see Ian's relief and his sort of excitement as to where the dev team is at.
Means in turn that they're less focused on the first one for now and are going to get back to it. And so it's stuff like that. I know sometimes it can be helpful just to hear from us that, you know, we don't have anything right now. We're working on it. We're going to have news for you in a couple of weeks, as opposed to just radio silence. Yeah. I think we all need to collectively work to get better at ever having the radio silence situation going on when people are just waiting for news.
Excellent. Okay, and I think I have time for one more question. So
first of all, skip ahead.
That's excellent. And I just actually I don't even know if I can answer the question.
55. Here we go.
Posts. You're getting into the tuning section, right? Where like now that you've added a bunch of new capstones, you're going to need to make sure that they all kind of make sense. They have some of them weren't capstone nodes before. They need to really compete with each other. So you guys ready to just talk about that process?
Yeah, tuning and iteration, right? I mean, and that's going to mean replacing some talents, redesigning some things that just aren't working. But we obviously needed to get the broad foundations out there. Looking forward to raid testing, Mythic Plus, endgames, seeing people actually using these builds in different situations, and moving beyond theory crafting to playing with them. And that's the only thing that's ahead of us. And frankly, that's actually a little bit of a relief. Like at this point in Shadowlands, we still had 4 different systems to implement. It was like, cool, we got...
You could see he's laughing about it because he knows like how triggering the word system is, right? But you can see there like the relief and the excitement on Ian's face that they're done. Like as far as he's concerned, they've had the first pass on the talent trees, and like he can sort of rest now. Yes, they need to be iterated on. Yes, they need to be changed. They will be. But they've got 2 months to do that now, guys. Let's assume that this pre-patch is going to release on October 28th or whatever that leak said. They still have 2 whole months to get that done. So they don't have 4 more systems to make. There isn't Azerite armor. There isn't Torghast powers. None of that stuff. It's all there in the talent trees. It's done. And so they've got 2 whole months for these developers, these 10 or 12 developers, whatever it is, in a room to now stop just creating stuff and then just start iterating on stuff. And they can communicate that as well. So it's really, really good. I think the situation looks really bright. And I'm glad that we got some insight from Ian essentially on just the team, whether he meant to give us that insight or not. I think it's pretty clear that this is a smaller team and there's multiple developers working on multiple classes at the same time. And so their time is limited and it's divided. But now they don't have 4 or 5 other systems that they have to make. They've made the talents. They're done. The first pass is done. Now they can work on them and work with the community to say, hey, how do you think this looks? Does this look horrible? Where should we go from here? So this is very exciting. It was kind of subtle, and I didn't really notice it the first time I watched this video, but looking at it now, I realize, like, I think it's really important to see that Ian is in a good state of mind, that he's happy with where things are at, that he feels relieved that they're over the finish line already, and now it's just time to like iterate and to get things sort of prepped and polish stuff right until October 28th. But they have 2 whole months to do that, and that's a lot of time to kind of get this stuff done. It's not a lot of time if you have to make a brand new system, but the systems are done. So that's very exciting. That's it, guys. That is the well, Ian asks one more question at the end here. He basically asks Max about simultaneous raid release, so releasing the raid at normal, heroic, and mythic difficulty on the same day. And Max kind of has an internal conniption there and loses his mind a little bit. But I'm not sure that really affects me that much, but it might affect the Race to World First guys a little bit. But all in all, I think this interview was excellent. I think it's really, really good to see Ian in such a positive light, feeling like really just positive and energetic and feeling good about the game and where the state of the game is at, and not feeling like he has to like answer a bunch of questions about, is this system going to be ready? Is this going to be ready? Do you think this is going to be good? Like, he doesn't have to fight into that. He's just sort of excited. He's here. The talent trees are basically already ready to go. They just need a bunch of tuning. Like, he feels like everything is kind of going according to plan, and it's really just good to see him in that kind of state. So I'm excited, guys. I think Dragonflight's going to look absolutely incredible. And I think that it's going to be a massive change for most of the community to see this new direction that the game is kind of going. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I know that was long, but that's the way these interviews go. I'm trying to condense it as much as I possibly could, but it's kind of hard with all these topics. But there was so much good stuff in here. If you want to go check out the original video, once again, of course, go down to the link down below and go check it out. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What was your favorite part of the interview? What are you most excited about for Dragonflight? And let me know. Let's get that conversation going down below. Thank you so much for watching. Drop a like and subscribe if you like it. And I will see you guys in the next one.